This is the Two-Tone Uncensored Podcast. Hosts Matt McCrone, Ryan Moreland, and Glenn Lotzenheiser talk everything Tennessee Titans. This show is made for the fans that bleed two-tone blue.
This is Justin Hartwig, and you're listening to Two-Tone Uncensored.
Welcome to Two-Tone Uncensored. I'm your host, Ryan Moreland. With me, as always, the new Apple spokesman, Matt McCrone. How you doing, Matt?
I mean, I'm great. I can't charge my phone while I'm talking to you, but, is what it is. I still got an Apple 7S.
It sounds like a waste of a phone. Also with us, back from his battle with the Black Plague, Glenn Lotzenheiser. How you doing, Glenn?
Well, I beat the plague, but I got leprosy now. So, shit's falling off, but I'm still here.
It's been downgraded to the gray plague.
There you go. I'm starting to get some gray hair, so here we are.
You and me both, man.
Yeah, you guys are old.
That's the cost of being an admin in that damn group.
Right.
All right, guys. This, obviously, you can tell by the title of the show, going to be our position breakdown as we move into the wide receivers. But first, as always, we're going to do the mailbag, and we have a little bit of news for you. So jumping into the mailbag here, Jay Russell asks the first question this week. He says, I'm sure you've all have seen that Jeremy Maclin has been released. What do you think the odds are that he ends up in Nashville, and do you think he'd be a good fit with us?
Low odds. I don't see them spending money on Macklin at this point. He's going to go to a team that's a contender, and we're starting to look like we might be. I don't see him wasting the last few years of his career on anybody less than somebody who's got a shot at it. It's one of those moves that, other than cost cutting, it makes no sense to me why they cut him. I know he didn't have a great year last year, and they probably figure they can replace his production with other players. But he's only, a year removed from being a Pro Bowler. And as much as I think he would help us, I don't see us bringing him in because we've already invested in young wide receivers at this point. So I think he could be here, he could play, slot receiver day one if nothing else. But I don't think it's going to happen.
No, I don't either. I think that, I'm not even sure if it was just a financial situation with him getting cut or if there's something behind the scenes. From a fantasy aspect, I think I owned him maybe in one or two leagues, and he did not pan out for me. But with that being said, I think he was actually physically injured as opposed to a couple years ago when he had that illness going on. And I'm not even sure exactly what he had, but it was something he had that started in college, I believe. But I don't know if it's related to that or if it's strictly financial or if, whatever his injury was last year is, catching back up with him. I don't see him in Nashville at all. Not to say that he won't come back to a team and who knows if he can even play anymore. But chances are pretty good that he does come back to the NFL on a different team for probably a cheaper deal. But no, I don't see him in Nashville.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. Low odds. I don't see him becoming a Titan. And Glenn, you bring up a great point. I think it's the price point. I think he's going to be more expensive than we're willing to give up. If he was willing to take a pay cut, absolutely. Why wouldn't you go get him a big boost to the wide receiver core? You get a veteran that can come in here and really lead these young guys that's had a pretty solid NFL career so far. But, he's either going to want to go to a team that's a contender, like Glenn said, or he's going to want to get paid. And I don't think right now you could put us in the role of, Super Bowl contender quite yet. And I don't think that John Robinson's going to want to, go pay a buttload for a wide receiver that's, had some injury history, as Matt was pointing out. So, yeah, I think the odds are low. I think he would be a good fit for our offense, but I just don't think that financially it makes sense for the Titans to go after Jimmy Macklin.
For shits and giggles, though, where would he land on our depth chart, do you think?
That's a good question. I think Matthews, knowing the system and as productive as he was last year, I think I'd still put Matthews ahead of him, and it would depend on how good Corey Davis was in workouts, how fast he learns. Because Macklin would come in at the disadvantage of not knowing the system, but Davis is at that same point, so I think he'd probably start at 2.
I think that's about where he would be too. Yeah, he's going to be in a rotation at that point with the top 2 or 3 guys, and I'm pretty sure that Macklin is a good enough receiver that he could beat out Corey Davis as a rookie. Don't know that it would last very long beyond that, but he could also push Matthews down the list. Macklin's a really good receiver if he's healthy, and if he can stay healthy for the whole season. He would definitely disrupt the depth chart.
Yeah, and I think that would actually hurt us moving forward with this team. So he is probably, it's safe to say he is better when healthy than, Taywan Taylor and arguably Corey Davis, however you want to look at it. But it's just it would hurt us or those guys growing, into the playbook and getting them settled in. So I don't see it happening whatsoever.
All right, guys, let's move on to the next question here. This one also wide receiver related. We've had our ups and downs with wide receivers for a while now, quite some time. So Mallory Walsh asks, at the end of the season, where do you think our wide receiver core will rank among the NFL?
Probably middle of the pack. They were a real concern for us last year, and they did okay. It all depends on how much we throw the ball, how well Marcus plays. We have what looks like on paper a pretty decent group. They got a lot of proving left to do before I could put them in the top half of the league, though.
For me, it's too hard to say. I mean, middle of the pack's an easy answer. I think that
that's why I said
there's way too much to be determined, and I don't think we'll fall on the other side of that coin, but right around the middle. But I would even say that the potential is there to maybe not. Well, I don't know. Top 10 is kind of pushing it in my mind. I don't think we have that kind of offense right now. Now, who knows what we turn into, because with the new weapons we're adding, our offense could change. So it's too early to say, but, middle of the pack is the easy answer.
Yeah, we did a lot in the offseason, getting 2 rookies coming in. We're seeing Matthews last year coming off of a really good year. Tajay Sharp, as we're going to talk about later, contributed. I think that we're going to be around that middle of the pack, though, still. I mean, 2 of your guys that you want to be big contributors this year are going to be rookies. Most of them still being either relatively young guys or at the end of their careers, like a Harry Douglas, and then you have kind of Matthews as the only one that's in between there. So it's still going to be some learning curve. There's going to be some struggle. So middle of the pack, I think, is a fair assessment. I think, 2018, 2019, you start looking at the Titans being, top 12, top 10, maybe in that region. If Davis and Taylor come in as promised and, play to the potential that we think they have. But for this season, even if they have good years, they're still rookie guys. They're still really young. They have a lot to learn, moving into the NFL, moving into a much bigger route tree and the like. So as these guys progress, I think it goes up. But I still think you're looking probably at like 13, 14 being the top, being the very high end, the ceiling of what they probably can be this year. All right, guys, next question here from Joe Griffin. And he asks, with Matt Castle being injured, do you think the Titans will bring in another quarterback?
No. They've already said they're not going to do it. They're just going to get the young guys more reps this way and give them a chance to fight it out a little bit.
No, because that's what Mike Mularkey said. No, we're not going to do that. We have enough guys. I don't remember his name. Dude from Western Kentucky. They're pleasantly surprised with how much he's picked up. And between him and Tanny, they are good. And plus, Castle will be back.
Right. For anybody who doesn't know, Matt Castle's out 6 weeks for an injury on his throwing thumb. That puts him back in time for training camp. So, no, Mike Mularkey's already said that he's not going to go after somebody. That Tyler Ferguson, the guy you're talking about out of Western Kentucky, has been playing good. I've also heard a lot of good things from Alex Tanny. The coaching staff has had a lot of good things to say about him through these mini camps and OTAs. I don't think, unless Matt Castle's injury is more severe than we thought, or there's going to be a surgery that's necessary, anything that prolongs his injury and deep into the season, more than probably week 4, then I think you might see them go after somebody. But I don't expect it to be an RG3 or a Kaepernick or one of the bigger names. I think if we did go after somebody, it'd be somebody that would fight Tanny for a backup spot until Matt Castle can come back. I don't think it'd be anybody big name anyway.
Let's talk about Colin Kaepernick. Oh, let's not.
Shut the fuck up.
All right. Sonny Ali asked the last question in this mailbag. With the success of the Predators... sorry, hold on. I just said that wrong. Will the success of the Predators have a positive effect on the Titans' attendance this coming season?
Yes. Glenn, I'm cutting you off. Yes. Glenn's a Penguins fan, for those of you that don't know, so boo him. But
you want.
I don't watch hockey, but the only reason I ever watched my first game the other night when the Preds whooped that ass is because of the Titans. I'm not a Nashville guy, as most of you probably know, but nor am I, never. I don't even understand the rules completely of hockey, but I did watch. If it wasn't for the Titans getting involved, it wouldn't have happened. I'm just not a hockey guy, but I will support, the Preds in this situation. I hate all things Pittsburgh, so that's a big part of it as well. But the city is going to see a winning team. Even if they don't win the Stanley Cup, I still say, going into their house, they showed support to pretty much the best of their ability. It's going to translate into Titans football. If we put a winning product out there, the fans are going to show up.
That's fair, and I think so too. As long as the Predators can find a way to win the series, then there's a winning tradition starting to build up for the city. Well, it's not going to happen, but it could.
Hey, no.
I'm just pausing to let all the boos and the people flip off the phone or whatever they're listening to.
Fuck you, Glenn.
All right, and then moving back on to football, there's no question that there's a lot of energy in this city, and I expect the Predators players to show up at the Titans games, just like the Titans players have been showing up at the Predators games, and that will help too. If they do win, then you can introduce your NHL champions at the game and get the fans that much more hyped up, and people will show up to get autographs from those guys. What kills me is that there's about as many people as it would take to fill up the Titans stadium showing up at Bridgestone, even though it only seats like 17,000, 18,000 people. So there's 30,000, 40,000 people standing around in the streets watching these watching from outside. We need to translate that energy into filling the Titan Stadium and just deafening people. Like, I'm sure people saw the pictures of the Penguins fans holding their ears because Bridgestone was so damn loud. That's what we need to happen next year with the Titans fans.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think it's going to translate, hopefully, a good bit. We'll see how much it translates. But, the Titans are getting better. We went from winning 2-3 games a year. Last year we were in the playoff race until week 16. We we're starting to put a team together that could have playoff chances, that could have division titles coming very soon. That is going to get them fans back into the Titans, but also having another team. You look at like any sports town, when one team goes on a run like that, it does help the attendance of the other teams that are in that city. That I looked it up today when I was just messing around just to see, just interested, and Bears tickets soared in the mid-'90s. And it was because the Bulls were so good. When the Bulls are winning a championship left, right, and center, every damn year, the Bears tickets were selling absolutely fantastic. They had a spike. And it was because, there's more energy in the city. There's more love for those hometown teams because one of them's doing so fantastic. So with another team in Nashville playing this well at this level, I think it's absolutely going to have a positive effect for the Tennessee Titans. So, I'm excited to see it too. And I'm not a Predators fan. I'm a Capitals fan, but I'm very happy to see, the Predators take this step, and very exciting to see. And man, does that stadium ruthless, the other night, chanting at Murray. That was just awesome to see. We're recording here on Monday night. They're about to play Game 4 of that series, so we'll see how it works out for them. But that's...
Hey, let me ask you before we go off topic here, because, again, I don't watch shit,
Right.
but what is up with the catfish? What does it mean?
It's
Tradition.
Yeah, it's like a tradition. It's supposed to be good luck. Like if you're... One time, a long time ago, I forget who it was now, but some hockey team was getting smoked in a game, and someone threw a fish out on the ice, and they came back and won. The team. So that's what it was supposed to be. They were getting beaten. The guy threw it out on the ice, and it's supposed to be like, they're going to come back now. They're going to lead a route, kind of like a rally cap.
Right, the rally monkey. I get it. Does any other team do that, or is that just like a Nashville thing right now?
There was the octopus.
Yeah, Detroit had the octopus. I know some other teams that have had different fish thrown on the ice.
I've seen shit like that. Like the only thing I know about hockey is what I played on like Nintendo. I used to be able to Blades of Steel and that other. There's some other.
Man, Blades of Steel was a great fucking game.
Yeah,
Yes, it was.
Game.
Ryan wasn't even born yet.
I know.
I still had it. I still played it. I had an older brother, so I still got to play Blades of Steel.
Nice. Anyway, that's all. I just
Okay.
didn't understand the catfish.
Yeah, that's all that's going on. It's just one of those things. Or someone said, "Hey, let's do this." I heard it was like a guy who had a restaurant or something in town that threw it out there for the first time. But because they were talking about it on the radio the other day, but it doesn't matter. It's
That
just
sounds familiar. That sounds.
What do you
familiar.
think would happen if we threw catfish out on in Nissan Stadium?
Well, you saw last year someone, wasn't it the Browns game or the Bills game, where they threw a dildo out onto the field? Maybe it's catching on in the NFL.
That's really not what I want to be pushing on this show, guys.
It's instead for the NFL, it's going to be sex toys. For the NHL, it'll be
Okay, moving on.
life. Man, I expected that from Matt, not you, Glenn.
Let's go.
All right, thanks for everybody who submitted stuff for the mailbag. As always, you can find it on our Facebook page or on the Tennessee Titans Uncensored Facebook page. Let's move on to the news, guys. There's not a lot here to cover. We did sign third-round draft pick Taywan Taylor. It's a 4-year, $3.3 million deal with just under $1 million guaranteed. Normal rookie deal for a third-rounder. But it's nice to see we get him signed. Still have a few guys to sign, most notably our first-rounders. But still, getting them done pretty early on. Doesn't seem like anybody's fighting yet, or putting up a fight, which is always great to see. So hopefully the rest of this just goes as smoothly as it has so far.
I expect it to.
Yeah. What?
Great insight,
Great
Matt.
insight. Thank you.
The next piece of news we signed UDFA Mark Spellman and subsequently waived Kareem Barton, who's been with the team. He, guy's bounced around from team to team. What's it called? Practice squad guy. Replaced him with Spellman, who had a pretty good college career, but seems to be a guy that's just going to be, camp body status.
Spielman? You ever heard of him? All guys that aren't going to matter when it comes down to it.
Yeah, camp bodies.
Yeah, that is what it is. Just, of course, slow news cycle. We talked about it a little bit earlier. And the other thing, Matt Castle, which I think everybody knows now, but getting injured, going to be out 6 weeks, as we said earlier. And so he should be back in time for training camp. So it shouldn't be an issue going into the season. But if something does happen, we will bring you guys up to date with it. But
yeah, you know what is news? The fact that Kevin Dodd's still not playing. But we don't know what's going on with that.
Right. I saw a thing that they're saying that he wasn't in the locker room for these interviews that they've been doing.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, that was my question because, like, nobody knows what the fuck's going on. So I figured, hey, if these guys, take a microphone and a recording into the locker rooms to ask players certain questions, I figured, well, the one question everyone wants to know is what the hell's going on. Nobody knows.
Last year we heard a lot from the coaches and the staff talking about how Kevin Dodd's mind wasn't in it, how he mentally wasn't there. And now you're hearing, like, you're not hearing anything about him. You're still not on the field. And that might just be with the injury thing and trying to get out of the public eye a little bit, which is understandable, but it only makes you feel more doubt towards him. And you guys remember, this is a guy that I had a lot of praise for coming out of college. I liked him a lot. Ultra productive player at Clemson. But, it's that bust, moniker is starting to be thrown around with him, and it's still early on, and he still definitely has time to change that, but, you got to change the attitude and stay in the facilities, get the workouts you need to get, stay with, with the team, absorb as much knowledge as you can and mature as a player, and I just wonder how much of that he's doing right now.
I think it's a fair question. Until we get some news, it's all just wild conjecture on our part. I don't want to, call the young man out as, being lazy or not interested in football or anything else. We'll have to wait and see what happens with it, but it's starting to look like arrows pointing down.
Yeah, I mean, it's not Zach Brown or anything.
All right, that's all we have.
Zach Brown played more.
Yeah, that's true. All right, that's all we have for the first half of the show. When we come back, we will be doing our receivers breakdown, getting you up to date on everything you need to know with this receiving core for the Tennessee Titans. So we will be right back.
Time to pay the bills. Some quick ads and we'll get right back to the show.
Hey Titans fans, you've probably heard us talk about the group page several times on this show, and I'm sure you're wondering what we're talking about.
Tennessee Titans Uncensored is a Facebook group page that was built by Titans fans for Titans fans and was founded by our very own Matt Necrone.
If you're a Titans fan that's looking to talk about the latest Titan news, then this is where you need to be.
And you can help me shit talk crackheads.
Because nobody likes crackheads.
That is Tennessee Titans Uncensored on Facebook. Tighten up. Hey guys, you've heard us talk about Hang 10 Apparel before on the show, and if you haven't checked them out, then you're truly missing out.
Hang 10 is the one place to find unique Titans gear that you will not find anywhere else.
Whether it's a Maragota hoodie, a Mahalo at Your Boy t-shirt, or Mike Keith's Music City Miracle Call on a sweater.
There are no flags on the field! It's a miracle!
The only place to find it is Hang 10.
Just go to hangtn.com to find all this great gear.
And while you're there, don't forget to use our promo code TwoTone to get 10% off any purchase.
That's hangtn.com, the official Titan shop of Two Tone Uncensored.
Tighten up.
You're listening to Two Tone Uncensored, brought to you by Podbean.
Hey, this is Bo Scaife. You listening to Two Tone Uncensored. Tighten up.
All right, welcome back after that quick commercial break. Before we jump right into the receivers here, just want to give everybody a reminder. We still are selling the Two Tone Uncensored t-shirts. You can find them on our Facebook, on our Twitter, or on our site, twotonepodcast.podbean.com. So go ahead and check those out. They're not that expensive, like $16 for a shirt. and they're pretty cool designs. So definitely check them out, and you can find them there, and it tells you exactly how to order on our Facebook and on the site if you're interested in ordering them. All right, moving on, guys. Let's talk about these wide receivers. The first guy I want to bring up is Rashard Matthews. Last season, 65 catches for 945 yards and 9 touchdowns. At the beginning of the season, I don't know if you guys remember or not, we predicted how many yards we thought that Matthews would contribute. And I believe I said around the 400 mark, and I was the low, and Matt, you were the high. And I believe your high ball was 700, so he was better than any of us predicted. Had a big season for us this year, and looks to have a big season for us next year. Last year, of course, started 7 games as the number 1 wide receiver, and all of them came in the last 9 games of the season. So as the season wore on, Matthews became a bigger and bigger part of what we were doing, had some very big key moments for us last season, and really submitted himself as the number 1 wide receiver going into the offseason. How did you feel about Matthews and, how much he did surprise us this season?
I think when we gave those numbers, and I think you lowballed me, I think I said 7 or 8. But anyway, we were all counting on Kendall Wright being a fucking Titan, which he was a Titan on the bench, and the occasional slot route that he would just fall over. But Matthews have definitely stepped into that role, and I don't think he's going to go anywhere, even if we add another receiver, even with Corey Davis, Taywan Taylor coming in. He's got a good thing going for him. He was a young kid coming in. I still think he has a few good years left. Not as far as his age. I'm not sure how old he is, but he's not. I didn't mean it like that. I think he's just coming into his prime, and I think him and Mariota have great chemistry. So it's not far-fetched to think he can do another 1,000-yard season, even with the new additions we're adding. I think he's pretty much cemented into this offense.
Matthews really showed a lot last season as far as in his bid to be the number 1 guy. Didn't stop us from drafting Davis, obviously. But I believe if Davis can become the number 1 guy, Matthews is a really strong number 2. He's been a every other season producer, so I'm really curious to see how this season goes for him. He showed good hands. He's willing to fight for the ball. He looked like he got more comfortable in the system as the year went on. So it's a good sign that we're even having this discussion about whether he's the number 1 or number 2 guy. He gave us decent production last year. It wasn't huge, but no one did. We aren't a pass-happy offense. So I think you'll get probably about the same from him, just maybe as the number 2 guy instead of the number 1.
Exotic smash mouth, pass happy. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Matthews had a great season last year. Just shy of 1,000 yards. He put up really good numbers. He had some big moments for us. That catch he had in that game against the Bears, diving in the back of the end zone, it's one of my favorite memories from the entire season. He had a really good year, and it really surprised me. I thought the guy was talented and stuff, but I also, like Matt said, I thought, Kendall Wright was going to be more of a contributor than he was. I think also, Mariota's development surprised me a little bit. I think he took a bigger step forward this year than I think I expected, which also obviously is a contributing factor. It was awesome. He came in as a guy that, did okay with the Dolphins and, kind of was getting pushed back their depth chart and came in and stole the number 1 wide receiver spot and was our best receiver, most productive receiver last year, even over Delaney Walker. So, fantastic season. And we took in a guy pretty cheaply, I might add, and he really showed us that he has a lot to give us and a lot to help out this team. So, awesome stuff. And, Glenn, you kind of touched on my next point I was going to bring up with Matthews, is with bringing in Corey Davis, obviously, it does put pressure on Matthews at that number 1 spot. So, my next question is, does Matthews start as the number 1 wide receiver at the beginning of the season, and do you think he keeps that role throughout the season?
There's every chance that he starts as the number 1 guy just because Davis has got a lot to prove. I don't think they're going to move him down. I don't know that you're going to see any real difference as far as who's on the field. I think he and Davis are your number one pair. I don't know that this offense being a number one receiver matters as much. We're just going to see who Marcus gets comfortable with and who he throws the ball to the most. The biggest difference is going to be when they're running third down plays, when they're calling plays for a specific receiver and trying to set somebody up, who's the guy that they're going to. You're going to see a lot of 2 or 3 wide sets, but you're going to be running the ball a lot when you're in a 2 wide set. So it takes a lot of trust in your receiver. We're going to find out pretty quick if Davis and Matthews are your true number one set, or if whenever you're in a run set, if you bring in somebody else who's going to run block a little bit harder for you, or that you trust to be able to get a little bit more open in a third round situation. That's going to be more telling to me than who's the number one guy. Who do they trust? Who do they call plays for on third down is what I want to see.
Exactly. I think he's going to be on the field, no matter what, as long as he stays healthy. Corey Davis has all the opportunity. If he can go ahead and run with it, we're obviously in a great situation. But you look at Delaney Walker, who could easily be our top receiver, or, add Jonnu Smith into that mix as well with Taywan Taylor. So many options. I still say Matthews will probably have, statistically, if he stays healthy, the best or the most yards this season. Corey Davis, I think, probably will maybe produce about 60% of what Matthews does, if that, and I'm not even sure he can do that. I'm really not sure with what kind of sets we're going to see and how many different wrinkles we can throw out there, because we have a ton of options this year. I think more than we've probably ever had, if these guys pan out, mind you. But I'm really excited to see what we can do. But Matthews pretty much earned his role, and I think he keeps it.
I think, obviously, starting off in the beginning of the season, he's going to be the number one wide receiver. Davis it's going to take him time to learn. And plus, right now, we're going to talk about Davis in a second, but right now is still nursing an injury, coming back from this injury. So they're easing him into everything. So it's going to be a little bit longer until you see him get meaningful time, meaningful, drills and stuff. And meanwhile, Rashard Matthews is still getting all of those reps. So that obviously gives Matthews a big leg up. I think as the season wears on, you might see them trade a little bit back and forth in a couple of games who's going to be the number one receiver. But I still think no matter one receiver or not, like Glenn was saying, I still think Matthews is going to be the most productive receiver on this team. Now, it depends on what we see from Davis this year, if that continues into the following season. I think Corey Davis is, we're slowly going to work him into being our, top receiver, the guy. That's why you draft a guy like that 5th overall. So I think his rookie year, though, I think Matthews is going to be still, getting the more, barring injury, getting more targets, getting more receptions than Davis throughout the season. But I think that is not going to last over the years to come. I think Davis, if he is what he's promised to be, is going to take that role from Matthews. But still, I'd be glad to have Matthews on the team. He really was very productive for us this year and proved quite a threat down the field. But let's move on here to Corey Davis, guys. Obviously, our first-round draft pick, and not the guy that we wanted, speaking for us three. But, we've talked about it on the show before, starting to get more used to it, more comfortable with the fact that he's on the team. At 6'3", 209 pounds, he's got a great frame, ultra productive in college, in the MAC conference. He, like I said earlier, underwent ankle surgery in July, but just about a week ago, he said that he could play right now. If the Titans had a game right now, he'd be good to play. But there's still, the coaches are doing the exact same thing they're doing with Marcus and easing him back into it, not trying to force him into anything, not trying to risk a re-injury. How much does that injury right now weigh on your mind as, moving forward with Corey Davis and as we get closer to the season?
For me, obviously he wasn't the guy I wanted, not because of anything I saw on film or, anything against him personally, but I almost ignored his film and just tried to stay away from him just because I wanted Mike Williams that bad. But it doesn't get any easier as far, or I'm not more, let me put it this way, I'm not more comfortable with him on the team now because I haven't seen anything from him. So I love the potential he has, and I'm not going to knock anybody that we select unless maybe it was Jameis Winston over Mariota, but luckily I didn't have to do that. I've never done that before. Like, when you're a Titan, you're a Titan. So I'm embracing him, but we haven't seen anything from him yet. So the potential is sky high, but his injury is still keeping him off the field. And I'm not saying rush him back because it's clearly not worth it to do that. But at the same time, I haven't seen anything yet. So, I don't feel comfortable with the situation at all.
I'm not in any rush to see this guy play. The OTAs, just learn what you can learn. When we get to the preseason, that's whenever I expect to see him running around and really proving it. When you look at his tape, he's got all the ability, and there's no point in taking that off the table by pushing him too hard early on. I expect big things from him this year because we did take him that high, and I trust John Robinson not to waste the number 5 pick in the draft. So I'm going into this season expecting Davis to really give us something.
Yeah, this is a guy I'm still not very high on. I think that he is a good player, and he has the ability to be really good. I thought he was very overvalued, overestimated when in the draft. I think we took him too high. But I don't think we get Corey Davis if we drop back. I don't think that would have been the case. I just think that he was overvalued. I got to see Davis play in person, and he does run clean routes, but a lot of the separation he got had to do with the talent that he was playing. I've said this before on the show. Running a clean route and getting separation are two different things, and he was getting lots of separation against very weak level college talent. For instance, one of the games I watched him play, against Ohio University, had great stats that game, but this is also a team that gave up like 400-plus yards to Texas State. It's not a good team, and we were the second-best team in the MAC behind Corey Davis's Western Michigan-led team. That is the kind of talent he was going up against. It wasn't great. So a lot of that separation, I wonder if he can continue to do that at the next level. You look at his tape, the production speaks for itself. He was ultra productive, like a touchdown machine. But the talent level that he played against scares me. I don't think he's obviously not going to be that productive in the NFL starting off, but it makes me wonder if he can keep up and get that kind of separation against NFL corners. I don't know. I guess we'll see. Obviously I want the most out of him. He's a Titan now, like Matt says, he's always says on the show. He's not Titan now. I'm going to obviously root for him. It's not exactly where I wanted Tennessee to go with that pick. I'm not very worried about the ankle right now. It's not that big. He's had a lot of time to recover, and they're easing them in. I love the way that Mularkey's handling these injuries in the offseason, just to add another, kind of metal onto Mike Mularkey's chest. He's done an excellent job of handling these injuries, not rushing guys back in, playing the timetables very intelligently, I think so. But I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Corey Davis. I think that he was overvalued. Now, I hope that I'm wrong, and he proves me wrong, and he's an absolute stud.
One thing I want to throw in before we get it off topic, and I don't know if you guys will be honest with me or anyone else listening. Obviously I said if you become a Titan, I root for you. That's just how it is. The Titans are my first and foremost favorite sports team over Clemson, over the Mets, over whoever I root for. Are the Titans your number one sports team?
Without question for me. The only team that compares would be the Rockets, and that's partly because of they're still in Houston. But it's the Titans, it was the Oilers, and then it was the Rockets for me. And everybody else after that is on a whole different tier. I don't care nearly as much about hockey, less about baseball. I'm a big fan of Bundesliga, professional soccer in Germany. Still, way down there, it's Titans, Rockets, and a whole bunch of other people. I used to write for the Houston Rockets. I broke into sports writing with them originally, but even then, my tagline was "OU Titan." It's always been about the Titans, so that is absolutely my first team.
Moreland, I don't know that you're going to be honest right here. Well, maybe you are. You sound like you're about to.
Titans have always been, huge for me. It would be tough, though, to be honest. It would be very close between them and West Virginia, obviously my college team, just because of how much West Virginia meant growing up for me, because I grew up really close, about 45 minutes from Morgantown, West Virginia. I went to the games all the time growing up, from the age of 11, I think, all the way up until I graduated from high school. We were season ticket holders, so I got to see a lot of games, and that was a lot of years of that was during the Steve Slayton and Pat White days when we had a really good football team. So it'd be tough, but in the last, if you would ask me this question probably 3-4 years ago, I probably would have said West Virginia, but now.
Clearly, Glenn and I have persuaded you.
You were deeper into the bandwagon.
It was before you guys, but doing the show every week and stuff, obviously you get more in depth into it, and you pay attention more. You're taking notes all the time and stuff, and plus, I think a lot has to do with when watching those Jake Locker years and stuff, and then I turn over and I'm watching Pat White rush for 300 yards a game, and when it's hard to love the team as much, but now you're seeing a trend and we're getting better. It's easier to get more into it and check updates every day and then read stuff. You get excited again. It's really hard to say. I would say that they're definitely the two teams. I'm a Capitals fan in hockey, but that doesn't compare to football for me. I'm an Orioles fan, but I hardly watch baseball. I'm a Wizards fan, but basketball is not as big for me. So it definitely comes down between college football and pro football for me, and it'd be really tight right now, to be honest.
Yeah, I think Titans are on a whole nother level from any of them, but Clemson is the next best, and then after that, it's not even comparable. Same with me as far as watching sports goes. I used to be a big Georgetown Hoyas fan. I used to watch the Sixers. Iverson was my favorite basketball player. When he left, I stopped. The Mets, they had a great year last year, but even then, I didn't watch until when it really mattered. This year, they're awful, which is usually what I'm used to. So, but it's just when you got a guy like Watson going to the Texans. He won Clemson a national title. That's never going to be forgotten. But now he's a Texan. He's not quite dead to me, but he's I got to put him in a separate category.
He's dead to you.
He's almost dead to me.
Luckily for me, Matt, West Virginia players get to the NFL and either suck ass or just ruin their own careers. So you never really have to live through the pain that much. No, I tell you what. Being a West Virginia fan and a Titans fan, I get the question all the time about Pac-Man, and it was fucking absolutely devastating. I loved Pac-Man Jones. He was my world at that age, and I had an absolutely fantastic college career. Then gets drafted that early by my favorite pro team. I was ecstatic. And then the way it worked out, with him beating strippers for taking the money he threw at them, it was just heartbreaking.
Yeah, that special kind of stupid.
Right, exactly. And then, of course, you had Chris Henry around the same time, who was, Chris Henry was getting all the trouble and stuff, and then really started to turn his life around and seemed like he was getting his head on straight, and then had the accident where he died, tragically. So,
and I barely remember this. Was he in the back, standing in the back of a pickup or something?
He was from what I remember, it's been a while, but his girlfriend was driving the truck away, and he was trying to run it down, caught up to her and jumped to jump into the back of the pickup truck, and she was still moving, and he didn't quite make it, and from the injury sustained, didn't live through it.
Wow. Well, hey, listen, I'm about to go because my phone's not going to allow me to stay. This is way more fun than talking about receivers, but you guys have fun wrapping it up with the camp bodies. It's been real. I'll see you guys next week.
You don't want to stay here to defend Taylor?
No, you can badmouth him, and I'll listen, and then next week I'll rebuttal.
There you go.
All right. See you, Matt.
All right. Later.
Glenn, I was going to bring up one more question before moving on here real quick. Because Corey Davis, none of us were high on him. And none of us were big on the pick, and he could turn out to be absolutely amazing. And obviously that's the hope. But going in Titans and Oilers history, has there ever been a pick that you just did not like for the Titans, and you ended up eating your words for you? Later on, that player turned out to be pretty fantastic.
No, I'm pretty much a god. I'm trying to think. There's not a lot of guys that I've just hated. I'm generally really optimistic about people that we draft. I was not a fan of a guy that we've already talked about here, and Kevin Dodd. I didn't like that pick. I thought Hunter Henry would have been a much better pick at that point in the draft. I haven't been proven wrong by it yet, though, so I'm still good with that. Who are you going to name?
The one guy that, and it wasn't because of the talent, it was because of where we picked him, for me, was Chris Johnson. And I was familiar with Chris Johnson because right before he got drafted, East Carolina played a 1-1 series for 2 years with West Virginia, so I got to see him in college. And he actually, led the team past us one of those years. They actually upset us the one year. And he was really good in college. He was fantastic with that team. He's the reason why we lost that one time that we played him. And the other time that we played him, with him on the team, even though we did beat him, it was a lot closer, than most people expected heading into it because, it's a small school going up against a much bigger school. And he was the reason in that game as well. So he was good, but I thought that we were getting like too, Rustin Webster kind of reaction. We saw that 40 time and we got like too excited about it and took him way earlier than I think a lot of people expected. Some analysts back then were still saying that he was a late second-round, early third-round pick. And I think the consensus, most people thought a second-round pick, and we got him in the first. I was not a fan of that pick. If we would have got him in the second or third round, I would have been very happy with the pick. But that early, I hated it. I absolutely hated that pick. And, a few years later, the guy runs for 2,000 yards. I think he still holds the record for most rushing yards over a 3-season span in NFL history. Which is a record that speaks for itself, obviously. So I was absolutely wrong. One of, the few Rustin Webster picks where he hit it out of the park.
I was happy about that pick when they made it, just because he was such a departure from what we had been doing with that position. Just a pure speed guy, and we had an offensive line at that point that I felt he could excel with us because they could open holes, they could protect the edge and get somebody around the side, but we didn't have the backs who could take advantage of all that. What killed me was just 3 years later, you start to see him struggle behind our shitty offensive line, and that's whenever I was getting pissed off. But no, like I said, I'm usually really optimistic. I think the pick that I've liked the least in the last several years, well, no, a bunch of Russell Webster stuff. Whole drafts of his I've really hated. We've taken quite a few guys, but I don't think I ever had anybody turn around and convince me otherwise. Generally, because it was only recently in the last 4 or 5 years that I really started even looking at the players and doing research and watching film, because I just didn't have access to all that stuff before. So there were lots of guys I didn't know anything about, so I didn't know them to hate them. So that was a big part of it, because by the time I got done with college, like Andre Woolfolk, when we took him, I saw him play in college. I was there, and I thought he was going to be a great pick, and he was a terrible bust. So, again, the opposite direction. I'm always optimistic about these rookies and thinking maybe we can coach them up and turn them into something, or they've got a trait here or there that we can work with. And so I'm always looking forward to seeing them in action. And then usually that's when I get disappointed.
Right, I'm usually the opposite. I'm a little pessimistic, and until I see him. I remember with Marcus, even getting Marcus, I didn't want Jameis Winston. I knew that. That was my number one thing going into that draft, is I did not want any part of Jameis Winston. With all the off-the-field issues and stuff, I wanted no part of him. And then I really wanted Leonard Williams. I remember I wanted him and did not take a quarterback, to wait it out. I didn't hate Marcus. I was a little bit reserved on Marcus just because I was like, is this guy going to be another guy that moves really well in college and then can't find those rushing those lanes in the pros? Is he going to be one of those guys that, sustains big injuries trying to run the football like he did in college and he can't do it in the pros? I kind of think I've always had that bias about, college running quarterbacks that go pro. You always just kind of feel like a little, skeptical just because of the injury factors and stuff like that. Obviously, Marcus has turned out. And it's not that I hated that pick. It's not exactly who I wanted, but it was probably, if I had a second choice, it would have been Marcus. But the Chris Johnson pick, I hated it. I was mad. I remember being like steaming mad that we took that pick. And then he ended up having great years for us, fantastic years for us. The 2,000 rushing yard season, which was absolutely, that's a milestone only a few guys in history have ever gotten. So, I was absolutely in love with him then, so I was dead wrong. But normally I tend to, I don't fall in love with a guy normally, and I always find, like, faults with guys. And
Good that you don't normally fall in love with guys.
Right, and you and Matt normally do, so.
Yeah, exactly. No, but, I was in the same position as you were. I actually got booted out of one of the Facebook groups arguing that I wanted Leonard Williams more than I wanted Marcus. And after that first game where he just absolutely tore it up, and just torched the Buccaneers, I made a meme where, you've bled with McNair, now bleed with me, and put Marcus's face on there. The saying being from Braveheart. I went and made that for him because he completely turned me around. So that's probably the closest to it. But like you said, in evaluating both of those quarterbacks, I knew I wanted Marcus more than I wanted Winston.
Absolutely.
Winston was one of those guys with all of his off-the-field issues. I was already burned on him. I don't like almost anybody coming out of a Florida team. And then you add in that Marcus did such a good job of when he was mobile, he always had his eyes upfield. That's one of the things I liked about Tunsil. It's one of the things I liked about Leonard Williams is as they were engaged with the guy they're on, they weren't worried about that guy because they knew they could beat him. They were watching for the next guy around. And, that's one of those hallmarks that makes me latch onto a player. It's like this guy is physically capable of handling his competition and is worried about the next play, not the play he's already made. And so Marcus, watching him run in college, at first I wanted no part of it because I don't like running quarterbacks out of college. I don't like those system quarterbacks. I don't trust anybody coming out of one of those teams. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is in college now, so you have to evaluate the other things about them. And
right.
So watching Marcus, I could watch him run and see his eyes rip the field. He was still thinking he was still making plays. And Winston would do that sometimes, but a lot of times he was just looking for where the hit was coming from or getting out of bounds and that kind of thing and just getting the yards he could get. And Marcus was always looking to make that next play. And you see so much of it. He's so much like a point guard out there. The way he fakes flipping the ball to people. He fakes passing and then makes a cut. It's beautiful for me to watch, and I'm so happy that we drafted him. That if you could ever be disappointed in taking a franchise quarterback, he was as close as I've been to a disappointed pick because I would have rather have had Leonard Williams. And I'm an offensive line, defensive line guy. I would rather have built the defense first and then got a quarterback. And I've said it on the show before. That's where I wanted to go, and I was really glad that we did do it because there hasn't been a quarterback since who could even hold his jock. So we absolutely made the right pick, and you have to give it to Russell Webster for not fucking that up.
That's absolutely true. One thing is I was going to say point guard, and you said it. The other thing too is look at the quarterback draft since Marcus came out. It's not been good. There's nobody that Dak is the only guy I guess that you could put in that argument at all, and that surprised everybody. Another thing with Winston is the footwork. He has a lot of arm talent. You can't take that away from him, but his footwork is sloppy and leads to interceptions. We've seen that even now. He's had a successful career so far, 2 years in Tampa Bay, but you see him throw off that back foot and throw interceptions. It happens. You don't see Marcus do that. He's smarter with the football in his hands. So I'm definitely glad that I wanted Marcus over Winston for sure, but I wanted Williams, the most and the weight. But obviously that was a great choice. And Marcus has turned out to be absolutely fantastic. But moving on, another thing that I do like about Corey Davis before we move on from him is his nose for the end zone. Guy was a touchdown machine at Western Michigan. Now you join a team as that kind of player with a quarterback that is a superhero in the red zone. And, the best red zone numbers in the NFL, bar none. As soon as he gets within that 20-yard line, MMA going to put it in. That's all that he does. He still hasn't thrown an interception inside the red zone. He's absolutely fantastic when he gets there. Adding a guy like Corey Davis that has the size to go up over most cornerbacks, has the ability to run past them, and just has that nose for the end zone, that's exciting. You're making, if he works out and he's that kind of player in the NFL, you're making an already dangerous red zone quarterback even that much more dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's a nice big target. He's supposed to be fast. We don't have a 40 time or anything to judge him by, but you can watch him on the field. He runs good routes. He's got good hands. He's a really good all around wide receiver, and that was evaluation when we first started talking about those guys. Going in between, would you want this player, this player, this player? I said of the receivers, he was the most complete receiver. I still wanted Mike Williams because I thought Mike Williams was a better big play guy as far as being able to go up and get the ball, being that red zone threat, because we can get down there, and Marcus is going to make good decisions with it. I think Davis has every opportunity to be a really good red zone threat, but also get you down there too. So I'm really looking forward to see what becomes of him. I think the sky's the limit for him. And as I said earlier, if Robinson drafted him that high, I'm going to believe that he can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. No reason to question the general manager, that's for sure. Let's move on to Tajay Sharp here. Guy was surprisingly productive at the season's start, and then really started to slow down as the season wore on. He was still the third most productive receiver out of all pass catchers on our team, behind Matthews, who we talked about earlier, and Delaney Walker. But we also drafted a guy that really fits the mold that Tajay Sharp was filling in Taywan Taylor. So do you think that Taylor forces Sharp down on the depth chart this year?
I don't know. I haven't seen enough of Taylor. My impression of Taylor was that he was never as fast as he was quick. He reminds me a lot in that sense of Kendall Wright. It's not my type of receiver. So he's going to have to go out there and prove it. He's got the skills. He's got the ability to catch the ball. Not great hands. He catches a little too much in the body. But, I mean, every receiver can make a catch away from the body, too. He seems to prefer to cradle the ball as he's catching it instead of reaching out and snatching it, which is more of a Corey Davis move, which is why he went in the first round. I'm curious to see what happens with it. I think he's a more dynamic player than Sharp, so he certainly has the ability to push Sharp down. So what we're going to see is how much work Sharp did in the offseason, how hard he worked to keep that slot position, to be on the field on a regular basis. And, if he does his job right, then there's no reason why with those physical gifts he can't, by at least midseason, be the slot guy. I believe they're going to put the best players on the field that will help us win. I hope he's that guy. I would love it if we had a more dynamic player as the guy who gives us the best chance. But, if Sharp's that guy and he's just a guy who catches the ball, I'm fine with that too.
The one thing I wanted to see from Tajay Sharp this offseason was for him to put on some bulk, put on some muscle, and learn how to get out of man coverage. That is when teams started pushing him man-to-man and started putting that press coverage on him, we saw Tajay really struggle. That was what we were afraid of at the beginning of the season. Early on in the season, he was our best wide receiver for a while at one point. Or most productive wide receiver, I should say. And then you start seeing guys press him, and he doesn't have like the moves or the strength to get out of it. So I wanted to see that, but I still think right now it's his job to lose. I think Taylor's going to have to prove it coming in. Taylor's got a lot of skills to like. He's a very clean route runner, gets more separation than a guy of his speed probably should. And certain times I've noticed on tape, I like that in him. The two things that you mentioned, he's more quick than fast in the hands. He doesn't catch the ball with his hands a lot. He does. He just doesn't do it regularly. He likes that ball to come into him. That can be a problem in the NFL when you're talking, everybody always says in college it's a game of feet, when you're throwing the football. And in the NFL, it's a game of inches. So I want to see Taylor really reach out and snag that ball out of the air. That's the biggest thing for me with Taiwan Taylor. I want to see him become a guy that catches with his hands solely and really reaches out and grabs that ball. If he can do that, I mean, that's where it really comes down to me, is, does Tajay Sharp get bigger, get more physical? Does Taylor learn to catch the ball with his hands? I think the guy that improves in either spot respectively the most in this offseason is the guy you see on the field more often, in my opinion.
Yeah, and like you said, going in, we knew Sharp was going to struggle with the press. And they were saying all offseason that it's not going to be that way. He's going to be fine. And then teams figured out, press him. He doesn't have the upper body strength to get you off of him. And that was what he was working on all offseason. So I'm curious to see how much stronger he is, how much hand fighting work he did, and if it pays dividends. And we'll find out, pretty quick here. He going into OTAs, he was the number 2 wide receiver. It was just based on production from last year. And everybody has to earn everything from there. That's just the way this team works, which I like. Davis is not the number 2 wide receiver yet. He's going to have to pass Sharp, which I expect him to do pretty easily. And then Taylor's going to have to come in there and push his way past Sharp. So they're going to have to earn it. They're going to have every opportunity to earn it. And just the best guys will be on the field. And I'm looking forward to seeing what new wrinkles they do with this offense because of that.
Absolutely. Taiwan Taylor, we're talking about him, very productive at a small school in college at Western Kentucky. Teammate of Tyler Ferguson, we've mentioned that before on the show, who's the quarterback we got as a UDFA. We talked about the issues that we have with him. I like Taylor. I think he's a good wide receiver. So, I mean, do you think, if you had to pick right now, Sharp and Taylor, who do you think is going to be that third guy on the depth chart?
Well, like I said, by mid-season, I expect it to be Taylor. Starting off the bat, they're going to go with the more experienced guy because you're the third guy. You're not starting regularly anyway. So I expect it to be Sharp because he has the advantage of already knowing all the plays. He's already been out there. Marcus already has chemistry with him. So they're going to start with that. But by midseason, I expect Taylor to push past him.
I think I'd agree with that too. I expect Taylor to do it. It's too easy when a guy has a weakness that you can exploit like Tajay does. And I think that as accurate as Mariota is with the football, especially in that short and intermediate route range, which is where you're going to see Taiwan Taylor catch 90% of his passes anyways, I think his weakness is less of a weakness than Sharp's is. So I think that's going to help him, push past him and take that spot. But we'll see. I think this is one of the more exciting camp battles that we're going to have, especially on the offensive side of the ball, is between these two. But let's move on down the list here to Harry Douglas, 10-year veteran, only had 15 receptions in 2016, but it seemed like every time we needed a big play, Harry Douglas was there to deliver. He only had 15 catches last year, and I can probably just think of 5 of them off the top of my head, that were big impact plays for us. Out of having such a small sample size, so many big clutch moments for us that we needed, big first downs, or we needed to move the ball down the field very quickly. Harry Douglas was there to come up with that play. But he still was a 10-year veteran that had a small role in this team. Now, going into this next season, big question is, with these new additions, does that push Douglas off the team? Or, does he get in that area where he's on the hot seat? Is it close? How do you feel about Harry Douglas right now?
He's kind of in the same position Macklin is. His production that he gave us can easily be replaced. It's going to be a question of how much do they value his experience and his familiarity with this coaching staff. If they're looking at this team, how much do you want to keep the 5th wide receiver around for the money that they're going to pay him? I think this is probably the year where he goes away because they have Weems as a return man who can play some receiver. We're not going to be running 5 wide receiver sets very often. And if we do, it's because we're flexing Murray out or something like that. We're not going to have 5 wide receivers from this group on the field at the same time, I don't think. I mean, it could happen, but probably not. There's other guys like someone we're going to talk about like Krause, who's fast enough that you put him on the field just in the chance that their fifth DB can't cover him and he gets open deep or something like that. I think that we added 2 new players, pushed him far enough down the depth chart that even if as little money as he's taking, he gets cut. I don't see him making it.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I think Harry Douglas, well, the one thing is, like, Harry Douglas doesn't have to be just better than the guys below him on the depth chart. He has to blow them out of the water because he is so much more expensive. You know, you don't really need a veteran there where you can plug in a younger guy who's cheaper. You know, it's not that important that you have a really fantastic fifth wide receiver. So that puts Harry Douglas in a very bad spot. He has to really bust his hump and really work his ass off this offseason and really show that he is, you know, head and shoulders above guys like Eric Weems and, you know, guys like Kevin Mabin, guys like Trey McBride, that he's much better than them, and then he's going to keep his job. If he's just slightly better than them, that's not going to do it because of the finances that come into play. You know, at the end of the day, it's still a business. You want to make not the best team possible. That's not your goal in the NFL. It's making the best value team that you can is now the goal. That way you have the extra money to pay quarterbacks, to pay left tackles, pay guys, you know, at different positions that are more important. So, you know, a fifth wide receiver, you're not looking for the best guy, you're looking for the best value, and I don't think that's going to be Harry Douglas at the end of the day.
I don't see how it can be.
Yeah, exactly. Next guy I want to talk about, Trey McBride. Young guy from William & Mary. He's been with the team for 2 years now, going into his 3rd season as a Titan. He's shown some promise for a late-round pick. You know, but last year, he had less receptions than Taylor Lewan, our left tackle. So that goes to show you, know, the guy we're not really using. With the additions like Weems, Krause, do you think McBride now is in the hot seat of not making this roster?
I think he is too. He's another one of those guys where he's not a return man. What's he really giving us at this point? They'd probably keep 5 or 6 guys, but those first 4, and after that it's who's cheap, who has something else they're good at. McBride is okay on special teams, so maybe that's how he makes the team. I don't know that Weems makes the team, even though we signed him to be a return man, just because Jackson makes him irrelevant for the most part. But Weems probably has a better shot than McBride, so McBride probably goes back to the practice squad again if he's still eligible.
Yeah, I think that McBride's going to be a practice team guy again. I agree with that. You do see some promise with him. You know, but he's kind of like decent at everything, but he doesn't do anything fantastic. You know, he's not great at one thing. That kind of limits what you can do, you know, in the NFL. Because if you are great at one thing, they can work it so your matchup, so you get to do that one thing. And I just don't see it out of Trey McBride. Eric Weems had 1 catch in 2015, no receptions, no action in 2016, but is a return man, and he's been a decent return man. You know, we talked about it when he was coming in, a little bit overpaid for what we pay for a return man, but coming in, another guy that's going to be on that wide receiver depth chart, mainly focused, though, you know, in the return game. I think, my opinion, Weems makes the roster, but he's not. I don't think he's going to be a factor in the passing game. Maybe a reception here or there, but he's going to be there as, you know, as a return guy.
Yeah, Weems should not be an impactful player for this year unless it's as a return man. Otherwise, we have seriously fucked up. Just he's not a great receiver. He's not a great return man anymore. So he may make the roster as a return man because he's better than nothing. But I think we have people that are better than him now too. So I think he makes the roster, but it's just as like a backup return man.
Yeah, I agree there. We talked about some of these other guys: Jonathan Krause, Kayvon Mabin, Darius Jennings, Braylon Cherry, Giovanni, and I know I'm going to say this guy's name wrong, but Giovanni, I think it's Pasquiasio? I have no idea. But any of these guys, do you think have a chance of making the final roster?
Pascasio, I have no idea. I don't know any of these guys, if I'm being honest. I'm kind of looking through there, and Darius Jennings has been around for a couple of years. He keeps ending up on people's practice squads and things like that. He doesn't record stats. None of these guys stand out as anybody better than anybody else. So whoever brings something unique to the team, speed, return ability, something that they can do if they tackle really well on special teams, that's who it's going to be. They're not looking for a lot of production from 5 and 6 on this roster.
You're right. I agree. I think that there's some guys in this list I like a little bit better than the other guys, Krause being one of them, but none of them really stick out that much. And I don't know a ton about them, just like you said, Glenn, but it's going to be, can you make a difference in special teams? I think it's going to be the big key factor on do you stay on this team. And it normally ends up being that with those really deep, positional players when you need, 6th, 5th guys, and at that position, how good are you on special teams? Can you make a tackle? Can you be the gunner? Can you return? Can you block? That kind of stuff comes into a big factor, and if you make a team or not. Versatility. If you're not one of the starters or one of the key backups, how versatile are you? And that determines normally if you make an NFL roster. So, now that we talked about these guys, Glenn, if you had to pick right now your starting 6, there's 6 guys, or if you think there's going to be less, who's going to be on your 53-man roster on day 1, who are you taking?
Weems and Krause. Those would be my last 2 guys. We know who the first 4 are, and I don't think that Douglas will be there. So, Krause has speed. I'm going to go ahead and throw him out there, and Weems has return ability. So, we'll put those 2 guys out there as my last 2. I don't see us keeping more than 6.
Obviously, Matthews, Davis, Sharp, and Taylor. We know those 4 are there. I don't think Douglas makes it as well. I think Trey McBride has a hard time fighting off these guys. I'm going with Krause and Weems right now. I will say, though, my wild card is going to be Maben. He's a guy that I've watched some tape on, and I do like this kid. I think he could put pressure on, especially a guy like Weems, now that we do have a couple guys that could be very effective returners for us. It comes down to how many return guys, are you going to keep on a roster? So that really threatens Weems' ability to stay on this roster. And I think a guy like Maben may be able to, make some headway, push him out. That's something to see. But if I had to say right now, I would put Weems on the roster over Maben, over Jennings, Cherry. I just think that right now. But I think Maben would be my wild card then, my guy I think possibly could make the team. But you never know. I mean, we'll see how these camp battles work out. I do think that the one to keep the eye on, though, is the Sharp and Taywan Taylor, who's going to come out on top as being, the third guy, and who's going to end up being the 4th guy on this depth chart. I think it's the most exciting position battle we have on offense this offseason, so I'm excited to see how that works out.
I completely agree. This is one of those positions. This and the secondary are the 2 positions that we were most worried about going into the offseason, that we're going to be the most excited about seeing how it works out coming into the season now. Just who's the last man standing at each position, how it works out as far as, I think we know who's going to be on the roster, but who gets the start? Who's the guy who gets the chance to go out there and make the difference? And so we're all just really excited, just waiting to see how this plays out.
Absolutely, 100% agree there, Glenn. That's all we have for the show this week. Be sure to look at those T-shirts. Check them out. They're on our Facebook page. You can also find them on our website. Again, that it's twotonepodcast.podbean.com. You can find us on Facebook at Two Tone Podcast or search Two Tone Uncensored. You can also find us on Twitter as well. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks for Matt being on earlier, Glenn, in and out the show with me. We'll be on again next week. The show coming out every Wednesday, and you can find it on Podbean, the Podbean app, iTunes, anywhere you can find podcasts, pretty much you can find it. So definitely check out the shirts. Thanks for listening. Thanks to my awesome co-hosts. We'll be back next week.
Tighten up.
Podbean.
He does. Shut up, Glenn. He does. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I don't care.
I don't either.
Go.
You go.
No, you do it. You do this shit. Now, okay, look.
Thanks for listening to the Two Tone Uncensored podcast. You can listen to the show at twotoneuncensored.podbean.com or by downloading the Podbean app on your mobile device. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at Two Tone Uncensored and like us on Facebook.